Hello gardeners, and welcome to Native Plant Channel. We're here in the third week of August, and I want to show you what's in bloom so that you can decide if you'd like to add any of these plants to your garden. I'm going to start with my favorite for the August garden, and although it's just finished blooming, I will explain why it is so wonderful. And that is summersweet, this large shrub right behind me. And the reason that I enjoy it so much is because it is so easy care. There's no maintenance to this. There's really no pruning except for whatever might get in your way. And its fragrance is absolutely wonderful. The name Summersweet says it all. You will know it is in bloom before you have even entered your garden. And it attracts so many pollinators. It has these beautiful blooms that they love and that I love as much as they do. And it grows, although you may have heard that it grows in wet soils, it does fine in average soils. And not only average soils, but this plant still looks fantastic and it has not been watered at all over this dry summer. So weeks and weeks have gone by without water and the plant still looks fine. It actually started blooming at the end of July. So it goes from July well into August, and the pollinators just love it. It does form colonies. So you want to site it correctly where it doesn't become a nuisance for you. So a great place to site it would be where you want sort of like a hedge. I have it here with a bench behind it. And it's just, you know, there's really not much you have to do. You have to get in there occasionally to remove any invasive weeds that might have come in, but because it forms a colony, not much gets in there. And it grows great in full sun, part shade, or it's also one of the few shrubs that will bloom in full shade. However, you won't get anywhere near the same amount of flowers than when it's in sun. This area started out many years ago, and I really don't remember how many, maybe 20 or so, with 4 small summersweet shrubs. In that time, they have filled in. So give your plants time, adjust for their growth. But you can see how it has surrounded this arbor. It's a great place for sitting, even though I don't spend a lot of time sitting here. But when I'm in here, it's in bloom, it just smells so wonderful, and I get to enjoy seeing so many pollinators flying around it. Next to summersweet, look for the yellow. And I was given seeds of this plant, which were started last spring. So I have not had this plant for too long. I was told it was a sunflower, but by the looks of it, I think it's actually false sunflower. Which is a sunflower relative. And sunflowers are very important to our bees because there are specialist bees that can only use the pollen of sunflower to feed their babies. A great thing about this is that it has been in bloom since about the second week of July, and we're now at the end of August and it is still in bloom. So it's got a long bloom time, and it appears that it will still be in bloom for a while more. And another thing is that in order to give you the best information, I've gone back through my photos and taken a look at when the plants started blooming, so I'll let you know how long they've been in bloom for. Another one you want to know about that's doing a great job, especially attracting skippers, and skippers are one of our Lepidoptera, and that is this phlox Gina. And Gina began blooming at the end of June. So here we are at the end of August. It's been in bloom for 2 months. It has a lot of very, very, very tiny flowers in these clusters. So you'll never see the whole thing looking, you know, in complete bloom, because some of the flowers die off and drop off while the others stay on. So it looks, during the 2-month period that it's been in bloom, it has times when it looks better and times when it doesn't quite look as full. But as you can see, it's still quite attractive. And if you notice, you'll see that there is a skipper enjoying it right now. Skippers love it, and the bees like it as well. So it's a wonderful plant for your garden. The flowers are on top, so the stems are rather narrow. It grows from the base, so there's nothing particularly attractive about the leaves. But although phlox is known for getting powdery mildew and having unattractive leaves, this one has not so far. The leaves on this one have looked healthy all summer. Now again, we haven't had much rain, so that might contribute to the fact that it still looks good. A plant that I did not properly cite is this, what I believe to be brown-eyed Susan. This, again, I started from seed and was told that it was black-eyed Susan, but I don't think that that's quite right. And I started this from seed. This was a seedling last spring. So this is its second season in the garden, and I'm going to show you other locations. Here's the one where it looks better and has stayed upright and not flopped over, because I have other locations where it has flopped over. It really needs to have completely full sun. Any bit of, the lightest amount of shade, and the ones I have are really not in shade, but, there are some areas that get a little less sun than others, and they flop over. But it has tiny bees that are enjoying it, and it does look beautiful, and it has been in bloom for a long time as well. I believe this one started blooming at the beginning of July. So again, something that's been in bloom for over a month now. And you can't go wrong with these bright colors in your garden, right? They just brighten everything up. And these are also good as cut flowers. I've been cutting them and bringing them inside, and I certainly had plenty of them available to cut. I want to mention to you Baptisia, because this particular one is growing in a shaded area under a lilac, but it still does well. It still puts on blooms, and the leaves look good, even though it is not as compact as it should be when it's in full sun. Because it is in shade, it just doesn't grow as nice and dense as the others do. But it's still an attractive plant and is benefiting skippers that use it as their larval host plant. A lovely plant that's been in bloom since July is Pearly Everlasting. And I have a separate video on this on Native Plant Channel, because this is such a useful plant. It is the host plant for the American lady butterfly, and I get American ladies laying eggs on this every year, and I see them in my garden all the time. The flowers will look attractive. They have these small white flowers, and they will look attractive pretty much into September. So it goes from July into September, and also feeds pollinators. You'll see some flying around, in addition to being the host plant for the American lady. Another good thing is that this plant is deer resistant. It has these narrow grayish leaves, which is a clue that the plant is deer resistant because of the grayish leaves. And it's just an excellent plant to have that kind of drapes over. If you want something that kind of cascades over, it does that also. Right over the Pearly Everlasting, you're seeing a bluish leaf. That is another Baptisia. This one does get a bit more sun. And another good thing about Baptisia is that the leaves will stay healthy looking pretty much throughout the summer, unlike other plants where they start fading away and becoming unattractive. Friends, note that you want to provide host plants in your garden as well, and not just plants for nectar and pollen. Pollen and nectar plants will have the insects fly in and come in and have a meal and leave. But you need to provide host plants that will allow them to reproduce and complete their life cycles, such as this Pearly Everlasting will allow the American lady butterfly to lay eggs, to grow into a caterpillar, and eventually into an adult. Such as this Baptisia will allow the wild indigo dusky wing to complete its life cycle and lay eggs and be a caterpillar here. And as milkweeds are needed for our monarchs so that they complete their life cycles. So you want host plants in addition to pollen and nectar plants in your garden. Let's walk on over and take a look. You're seeing blue, and the blue that you're seeing is great blue lobelia. This one starts blooming in the summer. This one starts blooming in August and goes into September. Another lovely pollinator plant, adds beautiful color to the garden. And a good thing about it is that it will stay erect. It is not a plant that flops over like some of the others do. This plant has a way of spreading itself where it turns up in places you didn't plant it. So I guess the seeds will turn up in places, but it's very easy to pull out. So if you don't like it, you can easily pull it out. You can see that see if I can get a close-up of a little skipper that just landed on one of them. And again, an attractive plant which looks nice peeking out of other plants. It has this way of weaving in and out between plants. Above the lobelia, you may have noticed purple, and that is ironweed. Lovely purple color now. Also started to bloom in August and will bloom for quite a while as well. I'm going to show you this one from a different angle momentarily. Gardeners are land stewards, and they care for the land and for growing and keeping the landscapes healthy. Native plant gardeners go even a step further. They care for the world, they care for the insects and the birds that are helped by our landscapes. So thank you for what you're doing to create a healthier ecosystem right in your yard. Stay with Native Plant Channel where you can see how to do this. So please subscribe, and also if you follow us on Facebook, you will find more information there. So check out Facebook as well. Here is some more of the brown-eyed Susan, and this is one that, although as you can see, it does get full sun, there might miss a few hours here and there. And this one is flopped over. This one I did have to stake because it flopped over, as well as the one across on this side, which is also next to some summersweet, and this one is also staked, but you can note how tall they are. I made a mistake in where I planted them because, again, I grew them from seed last spring and was expecting them to be about 3 foot tall. All indications were that they would be from 3 to 5 feet tall. I did not expect them to be 5 feet tall in their second year. And not all of them got this tall. I have another one that stayed probably about 4 foot tall that I'll show you. So with the plants, sometimes you have to move them because you expect them to be a certain height, and for whatever reason, they don't turn out to be that height in your particular garden. The goal of Native Plant Channel is to help gardeners create more eco-friendly gardens that will bring in butterflies, bees, other insects, and birds in order to create better habitat and better ecosystems right in their own yards. I will show you plants not only in my garden, but we'll take you on virtual tours of other gardens. This way you can see how a plant performs, what it might look like in the garden, how to use it in context. Because after all, a photo doesn't give you much information. That flower might look pretty, but you have no idea how that plant grows. So if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then what's a video worth? Because here you can see the size, you can see what the plant looks like, and sometimes you're going to see it when it's not in its prime, unlike those photos that you'll find in catalogs. Behind the rudbeckia, the plant that's getting ready to bloom here, well, that's a goldenrod, which are very valuable plants for the fall, producing nectar in the fall. However, they are valuable for more than that. Like our sunflowers, there are certain bees that only use the pollen of goldenrod. And goldenrods are extremely valuable to our insects. There are many Lepidoptera that use goldenrod to lay their eggs, and it is one of the last flowers to be in bloom, producing nectar for those pollinators late in the season. So goldenrod is a plant that everyone should have in their gardens, and I know that some people are afraid because perhaps they have seen Canada goldenrod, which is very aggressive in how it spreads, but there are other goldenrods that are not at all aggressive. I particularly recommend wreath goldenrod because that stays as a clump and doesn't really spread much at all. Let's take a walk under the arbor. And if you've seen my videos before, you're familiar with the coral honeysuckle that is on this arbor, which I highly recommend if you're looking for a vine, because not only is it a great vine and it's extremely beautiful, particularly in May when it's in full bloom, but also because it's much easier to control than other vines that might be available for the garden. But let's walk under and see what's on the other side. And here is the other brown-eyed Susan, one that is completely in full sun, and for whatever reason this one has stayed a much more manageable height, has not needed staking, has stayed low. In this spot, this is where I had a holly that came down and we had to remove earlier this spring because a tree had fallen on it actually and killed it. Although the holly does have some that are resprouting, so I do believe it is coming back. The blue that you will see is some more great blue lobelia. You also might have noticed here the swamp milkweed, a wonderful plant, the one that everyone should have in their garden, very garden worthy, and that monarchs used for laying their eggs. So this is one that the monarch caterpillars need. This one starts blooming in July or so and is still blooming. The grass that you see here, this is little blue stem, which has not only blue leaves but will also pick up other colors in there. And it's an easy to control grass. It's when you have to cut it back, it doesn't get gigantic as other grasses do, so it's pretty easy to control. So I'll show you here quickly a monarda. Now this one I purchased and put in only about a month ago, so I don't know if this is really the time of the year that it would normally be blooming. But this is a low growing red one called Be Mine. And I don't know if this is the normal time for it to bloom or it's just blooming at this time this year because it was just planted about a month ago. Now, as far as which plant has been in bloom the longest in my garden, well, that goes to another milkweed, the orange milkweed, also a monarch favorite and a tough plant for drought, tough plant in many situations. And this one began blooming at the end of June, and here we are at the end of August and it is still going. So lovely color as well, does very well in difficult situations, but it does need full sun. Behind the orange milkweed is wild senna. This one blooms in yellow and the bees love it. They have to go deep into it to get its nectar. However, this plant also looks like there's a very similar plant called Maryland senna, and they're hard to tell apart. Very similar, and they both provide benefits to bees. This one is easy to grow from seed, and this one was grown from seed, started last spring. It does get 6 foot tall, so if you need something that grows very tall, it does get 6 foot tall. It is reputed to be deer resistant, although I have not had the opportunity to test that yet, so that's something else that I need to test, is how deer resistant it is. It also stays erect, doesn't need staking, which makes it attractive as well. And the leaves kind of add a more tropical tone to the garden. Wild senna is a plant that is considered endangered in some of the Northeast, yet it's relatively easy to grow. So this is one where you'll be really helping out our environment by planting it in your garden, as it is more and more difficult to find this in the wild. I mentioned ironweed earlier, and here it is. It is about 8 foot tall, possibly even taller, and has beautiful purple flowers. I just love purple. It's also loaded with bees and other pollinators. Skippers like it as well. And I know that it gets rather repetitive in these videos to hear that. So I apologize for repeating it, but really that is the attribute that we're looking for in our plants and making them improve the ecosystems in our gardens. So yeah, I can't help myself from saying it, because it is such a great plant to attract pollinators. And I have a hint for you regarding dry summers as we've had, for those places that might institute water restrictions. You want to focus on watering your trees and shrubs. Don't forget about them, because they live for years. Perennials can be replaced more easily and much less expensively. If you lose a tree or a shrub, they normally take up a large part of your garden, and it's very hard to replace that in a short time period, because it takes years for them to grow. So make sure you're paying attention to your trees and shrubs, and don't worry as much about watering perennials. Native plants can do so much for our ecosystems. They bring balance. They're going to bring in all kinds of insects so that they can all keep each other in check. And then we'll be able to enjoy not just the beauty of the plants, but the beauty of all the life that is in our gardens. So thank you for what you're doing to create better, balanced ecosystems right in your garden. A plant that began blooming about a month ago is this helenium. The common name is sneezeweed. Beautiful yellow flowers. This is the one that I've showed you on a previous video where I did not expect the height. This is a shorter one that was browsed by deer earlier, so it did not grow as tall. It is caged in to keep the deer from eating it. You can see the height on this one is a little bit more reasonable, but these pretty yellow flowers, yellow centers, loaded with pollinators again. And then I'll show you another one, and its full height. And one problem with this plant is that the stems tend to kind of dry out, and the leaves start drying out and looking ugly. But it does bloom for a long time, and the flowers are quite attractive. I'll show you the one in the back. You'll see some of the center stems and how they have kind of browned out a bit. But again, the flowers are gorgeous. Something else you should be aware of is that these days a lot of people are spraying for mosquitoes. And this is bad because even though the products might be advertised as some type of natural product, they're killing everything. They're not just killing the mosquitoes. So here you are attracting bees and all these other pollinators. And if you're spraying for mosquitoes, they'll just end up dying. So please be aware of that. In addition, mosquitoes fly. So even if a product is being brought in to kill the mosquitoes on the property at that particular time, new ones are just going to fly in. So whether it's mosquitoes or ticks, killing them is just going to kill off the other insects that are around as well. The best way to control mosquitoes is at the source, meaning making sure that there's no standing water around. The grass that you're going to be seeing is river rose, and this is one that I'm having some second thoughts about. I've had it for a number of years, and I liked it a lot when it was in shade and stayed low. Now it gets very tall and then kind of flops over or splays over. And the problem with it is that it does reseed very heavily. And then I have to remove a lot of the seedlings. So this one I'm having second thoughts about on whether I want to keep it in the garden or not. I think it's great for a shady area, but once an area gets sunny, I think it just gets a little bit too aggressive for my taste. The seed heads are very pretty, as you can see. It has oat-shaped seed heads. They start turning brown. They make a nice contrast as we move into the fall, and the birds do eat them. But I like to garden in a way that involves as little maintenance and work as possible, and I think having to pull up a lot of seedlings is making me rethink this particular plant. When you're out working in your garden, please make sure to take the time to look at what's happening. Take a close look at the leaves. Look under them. Look at the pattern of the leaves. Look at the flowers. See what might be living inside some of those flowers. Because you might notice all the things that are flying around, but when you take a closer look, you'll also see many other insects living inside your plants. Thank you so much for being a native plant gardener, for making our world better and creating healthier ecosystems for all our bees, butterflies, other insects, and our birds. Have a great day.